The office is already quiet when you enter it. Lowe's Angels, early 1960s. Late afternoon light slants through Venetian blinds, stripping the wall behind the desk in pale gold and shadow. The air smells faintly of tobacco and mimeograph ink. Somewhere outside, a studio truck backfires, then fades into the low mechanical hum of the Paramount lot. Two men sit across from each other. One is a producer, mid-40s, dark suit, tie loosened half an inch too much for this hour of the day. He has papers spread in front of him, contracts stacked neatly, hands moving as he talks, small, confident gestures, the kind learned from years of meetings that always end his way. The other man doesn't interrupt. Sidney Koshak sits back in his chair, jacket buttoned, hands folded lightly over his stomach. No notepad, no briefcase, his face is neutral, almost pleasant. He watches the producer with an expression that suggests patience rather than interest. The producer keeps talking. He explains how this is a misunderstanding, how the studio respects labor, how schedules are tight but fair, how nobody wants trouble. He smiles once as if to signal reasonableness, as if this were a conversation between equals smoothing out a wrinkle. Koshak nods once. The room settles into a rhythm, the producer's voice filling the space, the faint ticking of a clock on the wall, the muted sound of distant construction outside. No one else is present, no witnesses, no stenographer, no memo being drafted. This is supposed to be informal. At one point, the producer laughs, a small laugh, reflexive, the kind people use when they think the tension has passed. Koshak doesn't smile back. He waits until the producer finishes his sentence. He lets the silence hang just long enough to be noticed, not awkward, not hostile, just long. Then he speaks. His voice is low, calm, almost conversational. Tomorrow there will be no drivers. He doesn't raise his voice, he doesn't lean forward, he doesn't emphasize the words, he simply states them like a man reading tomorrow's weather. No drivers. No trucks. No lights moved. No sets delivered. The sentence ends, the room doesn't. The producer blinks once, then again. He waits for the rest of the thought, for a condition, a demand, a threat to follow, something negotiable. Nothing comes. Koshak looks at him steadily, not cold, not angry, just finished. The clock keeps ticking. Outside, somewhere, a hammer hits metal. The sound feels suddenly intrusive, like noise bleeding into a sealed room. The producer shifts in his chair. He opens his mouth, then closes it. His eyes flick to the stack of contracts on the desk, then back to Koshak, as if checking whether those papers still mean what they did 5 minutes ago. This is the moment things change. Because the producer understands something, not all at once but in pieces, stacking quickly, heavily. Drivers don't belong to the studio. Trucks don't answer to him. Equipment doesn't move because it's owned, it moves because someone allows it to move. And tomorrow is already spoken for. Koshak doesn't explain how it will happen, he doesn't name a union, he doesn't reference a call he's made or a call he will make, he doesn't need to. The power of the sentence is not in its content. It's in its certainty. The producer tries to regain ground, he clears his throat and says something about arbitration, about procedures, about escalation. His voice is quieter now, slower. Koshak listens again, patient still. When the producer finishes, Koshak tilts his head slightly, a gesture so small it could be mistaken for politeness. Then he says nothing. That silence lasts longer than the first. Long enough for the producer to hear his own breathing, long enough for the hum outside to feel distant, irrelevant, long enough for the room to feel sealed off from the rest of the lot, as if what happens inside it will quietly determine what happens everywhere else tomorrow morning. The producer finally understands the shape of the trap. There will be no strike announcement. No picket lines. No shouting crowds or newspaper headlines. The lot will simply stop. Cameras will wait, actors will arrive and sit in their trailers, directors will check their watches, assistants will make calls that go unanswered, hours will pass, money will burn. And no one will be able to point to a single order that caused it. The producer swallows, he asks carefully now what Koshak wants. Koshak smiles, not broadly, just enough to acknowledge the question. He doesn't answer it. Instead, he glances at the clock, stands, buttons his jacket. The meeting apparently is over. As he reaches the door, he pauses, not dramatically, not for effect, just long enough to look back. Tomorrow, he says again, same tone, same volume. Then he leaves. The door closes softly behind him. The producer remains seated. He doesn't chase after him, he doesn't shout, he doesn't call security, there would be no point. He looks at the contracts on his desk again. They feel lighter now, less solid, like paper that has already lost its authority. Outside, the sun is lowering, the shadows on the wall have shifted, time has moved on without asking permission. Somewhere on the lot, men are finishing their shifts, drivers are heading home, trucks are being parked. Nobody knows they are about to become the most important absence in Hollywood. The producer reaches for the phone, then stops. Because he realizes something else, something colder. Whatever just happened in this room cannot be fixed by a call tonight. Tomorrow is already decided. And the studio, one of the most powerful institutions in American entertainment, has just discovered that it does not control the morning. Morning arrives without ceremony. Los Angeles, the sun rises the way it always does, warm and indifferent, washing the Paramount lot in pale gold. From a distance, nothing looks wrong. Gates open, office lights flick on, secretaries arrive with coffee cups and handbags. A few actors step out of cars, scripts tucked under their arms, already thinking about scenes they'll rehearse before cameras roll. Then the first question surfaces. Where are the trucks? It's asked casually at first. A production assistant glances at his watch and scans the lot. Another checks a clipboard, someone assumes traffic, someone else jokes about drivers sleeping in. But 10 minutes pass. Then 20. Grip trucks don't arrive. Lighting rigs stay locked behind depot doors across town. Set dressers wait beside empty sound stages, hands in pockets, leaning against walls with nothing to touch, nothing to move. Phones start ringing. Quietly, carefully, nobody panics yet. An assistant calls a dispatcher he knows personally. The call goes unanswered. He leaves a message, light in tone, almost apologetic. Another assistant calls a different number. Same result. A third reaches someone who answers, listens, then says only, "I can't help you," and hangs up. Inside production offices, conversations drop in volume. The producer from yesterday's meeting stands by his window, looking out over the lot. From this angle, he can see 3 sound stages scheduled to go live by noon, hundreds of people attached, millions of dollars calculated down to the minute. He doesn't call Sidney Korshak. Not yet. He waits as if hopping reality will contradict the sentence spoken the day before. It doesn't. By mid-morning, the silence has a shape. It moves through the lot like fog, soft, unannounced, but impossible to ignore. Crew members sit on apple boxes, trading rumors. Department heads whisper instead of bark orders. The usual controlled chaos of a studio morning has been replaced by something worse: stillness. No picket signs appear. No chants. No union announcements. That's what makes it unsettling. Because nobody can point to the problem. There is no rule being broken loudly enough to fight. Inside one office, a junior executive suggests calling the police. He's immediately shut down, not with anger but with looks, the kind that say you don't understand where you are. Another executive suggests going public, pressuring labor through the papers. The idea dies mid-sentence. Who would they accuse? What would they print? Nothing happened today. By noon, catering trucks don't arrive either. Lunch breaks pass without lunch. An actor storms out of a trailer and demands answers. A director paces. A cinematographer sits on a folded chair, checking his watch again and again, calculating how many hours of daylight are being wasted. The producer finally makes the call. Not to Korshak directly, never directly. He reaches out to someone adjacent, a man who knows a man. The response comes back quickly, efficiently, devastatingly vague. Sidney said tomorrow. That's all. No demand attached. No negotiation offered. No list of conditions. Just confirmation. By early afternoon, accounting departments are quietly recalculating losses. Every stalled hour burns money. Crew contracts guarantee pay even if nothing rolls. Locations are rented. Talent is booked. Insurance clocks tick forward regardless of silence. And still nothing moves. The fear begins to spread sideways. Not fear of violence, fear of exposure. Because this kind of stoppage doesn't come with a villain, it doesn't give executives a rallying cry. It forces them to confront something they rarely acknowledge. The studio doesn't command the system, it participates in it on permission. Across town, drivers sit at home, some listen to the radio, some drink coffee and wait. Nobody has been told to strike, nobody has been handed a sign, they simply know not to show up. That knowledge travels without paper, without instruction. By late afternoon, the producer understands something else. This isn't leverage. It's a demonstration. Sidney Korshak didn't need to threaten future weeks. He didn't need to escalate. One day is enough to teach the lesson. One day is enough to show that every schedule, every contract, every plan depends on invisible consent. As the sun lowers, meetings begin behind closed doors. Executives gather without assistance. Doors shut softly. Names are spoken in low voices, not accusations, questions. Who else is vulnerable? What other productions could be stopped? Who else has been talking? The producer from yesterday sits silently through one of these meetings, replaying the moment again and again. The blinds, the clock, the tone of the sentence. Tomorrow there will be no drivers. He realizes now that the sentence wasn't about trucks. It was about ownership. About who truly controls time. That evening, the phone rings again. This time, the producer answers immediately. The voice on the other end is calm, familiar, respectful. Sidney is willing to listen now. The meeting is set for the next morning. No agenda. No witnesses. Just a chance to make things right. The producer hangs up and stares at the receiver for a long moment. He knows what listening will mean. And he knows that whatever is agreed to will never appear on paper. Because this is how power prefers to operate, quietly, without records, without fingerprints. Outside, the lot empties early, workers leave with questions unanswered, sets remain half-built, equipment stays locked away. Hollywood sleeps uneasily that night. Because everyone senses it now. If one sentence could do this, what else could be stopped just as easily? The second meeting is shorter. Same city, same decade, a different room this time, smaller, less formal, chosen deliberately, no desk between them, just two chairs angled slightly inward as if to suggest cooperation rather than conflict. Sidney Korshak arrives on time. He looks unchanged, same calm posture, same measured pace. He sits without ceremony, folds his hands again and waits. The producer speaks first. His voice is controlled, but something has shifted. Yesterday he talked like a man managing a problem. Today he talks like a man acknowledging a condition. He outlines concessions carefully, never framing them as surrender. He uses words like adjustment, clarification, mutual respect. Korshak listens. When the producer finishes, there is no immediate response. Just the soft ambient noise of the room, the building settling, a distant elevator bell, footsteps passing in a hallway that feels far away. Then Korshak nods. Once. Tomorrow, he says, drivers will return. Nothing more. No victory speech, no warning, no reminder of what could happen again. The sentence lands gently, almost kindly. And that's how the studio understands it was never about punishment. It was about memory. The next morning, trucks roll in before sunrise, engines idle, equipment moves, sets are dressed, cameras roll as if nothing unusual happened. On paper, the delay is explained away as a logistical hiccup, a scheduling issue, a minor labor matter resolved efficiently. No press release is issued, no internal memo circulates. The stoppage disappears into accounting spreadsheets and quiet embarrassment. But the people who were there remember. They remember the stillness. The unanswered phones. The way authority dissolved without resistance. Within weeks, behavior changes. Producers begin checking with labor contacts before locking schedules. Executives avoid pushing too hard, too publicly. Meetings that once ended with ultimatums now end with careful pauses. Not because anyone says Sidney Korshak's name, but because they don't need to. Power like that doesn't require repetition. One demonstration is enough. On the lot, younger executives hear fragments of the story secondhand. A day when nothing moved, a meeting that fixed it without a single document signed. The details blur over time, but the lesson remains sharp. Never assume control you can't enforce. Years later, when studios grow larger and more corporate, when labor agreements thicken into binders and lawyers replace fixers, the mechanism changes, but the memory doesn't. Because the truth revealed that day never belonged to a single man. It belonged to the system. Hollywood likes to believe its power lives in contracts, stars, and capital. But that morning in the early 1960s exposed something quieter and more unsettling. The industry functions because thousands of people agree every day to make it function. Withdraw that agreement silently, and the illusion collapses. Paramount Pictures survives, thrives even, the films get made, new stars rise, old ones fade, the machine keeps running. But somewhere inside its institutional memory, that day remains filed away without a label. Not as a strike. Not as a crisis. Not as a scandal. As a reminder. Sidney Korshak never needed to repeat the sentence. He didn't need to. Because the studio learned what it meant. And long after the trucks returned, after the lights were switched back on and the cameras rolled again, something else never fully came back. The assumption. The assumption that power announces itself loudly. That threats come wrapped in anger. That silence is harmless. In that quiet office, in that single sentence delivered without heat or menace, Hollywood glimpsed the truth it prefers not to look at too closely. The most effective control doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It simply decides what happens tomorrow. And then leaves the room.